Well, we will get started. I think most of you have met Michael Hickman. This is Nathan Atkinson that just came in, and we've had another really good day, and we've taken him all over the county, and he's remembered and thought of all the years that he lived here in Murray County, so he's come home to be here with us tonight. So I'm going to start it off with just a simple question. We've got your resume. We studied it. Tell us something we don't know from your resume. Turn it on.
And I've told this a couple times today, so some of you will bear with me. You know, a resume just talks about the qualifications and not who the person is. And I think it's very important that you do know who the person is. And a little about me is, I am from Murray County, and my mom's side of the family has always been in this area. She graduated Central as well as my brothers, and actually I had two brothers at Spring Hill and two, myself included, at Central. My mom came from a family that lived over on East 9th Street, and she was one of 8 kids, and she was the only one that graduated. It was a time where, in the poverty, where you had to take care of the family first. You got a job to help support the family, and so she pushed through, and that's what she did. My dad, he came from a farming family, probably poor enough to not even know they were poor. He would hitchhike his way to school, and he was identified earlier in his elementary years or middle school as he had special needs. And it took a teacher to really dig into that and try to figure out, and he didn't have special needs. He was almost legally blind. So they gave him, that teacher was savvy enough to know to get him glasses, and he excelled from there on. Out of my family, I was the only one to graduate college. I had one other uncle, Rayburn Hickman, who is principal at Richland. So I really didn't have that model of success in college. So I get it. I get what the state's trying to do with these kids and try to get them to push through and go to college and understand what it's about. So I walk into Columbia State for the first year and a half, like most kids did when they graduated Central, and then moved on to MTSU, and it was tough. It was really tough because nobody was there to tell me what to do and how to do it, and I didn't have that model. So in the meantime, I was talked into joining the military. So in 1992, I signed up for the National Guard, and that changed my life. That gave me organizational skills. It gave me a lot of life skills that I wouldn't have received anywhere else. And the military was a blessing to me at that time. So much so, when I came back, I stayed on the dean's list every semester after that. Once I chose my path in education, I graduated, and some people have asked me, why didn't you come back to Murray County? Well, being a new teacher, you apply, and you take the first job you get. And then the first job I was offered was in Rutherford County, so that's where my career began. It wasn't that I was seeking to go to Rutherford County, it was just that was the first job that I was offered. Stayed there, got out of the military for a little bit, and then in 2000, it was about 2002, I decided to work on my master's. So I looked at my wife and I said, I ought to get back in the military. They'll pay for it. She said, that's probably not a good idea, what all is going on. I was like, nah, National Guard doesn't go anywhere. May 2003, I'm in Kuwait with a big fat I told you so. But that was an experience itself, and I'm grateful for that experience. 2004, I came back and finished my degree to get my master's. Once I received my master's, God works in serious ways, as they say. And unfortunately, my my principal at that time while I was deployed had been diagnosed with breast cancer. I was called, hadn't been back very long at all, was called to an office, walked into the office, and there sat my superintendent. And I won't lie, I was nervous. Why is this guy in here seeing me right now? What have I done? I was running through, what have I said, done? And anyway, but he asked me to assume the role of interim assistant principal. So I took that role. And at that time, she was still alive. And during my time there, by the end of the year, I was looking at a high school, going there to be an assistant principal. Had just had my second interview for a callback, and I just felt really pulled to stay where I'm at, even though it was an interim. The faculty was going through a lot with the principal being diagnosed. Wasn't an hour later, I got the phone call she had passed away after I made my decision. So I made the call to the high school principal and said, thank you, but no thank you, this faculty needs me. Sat there for 5 years, learned how to be a principal, thought I did, and applied. And in 2009, I became principal of a K-8 school. It was a community school. And when I say community, it's whenever we held an event, if it was going to end at 6 o'clock, I knew I was going to be there to 10 o'clock because that's where people gathered to meet and talk. And you had to understand that. And I told a funny story about it, was if any of you ever know much about Rutherford County, it was in the area of Buchanan. Well, the first night I met the parents, I kept saying, well, I'm going to be here at Buchanan this. And a lady pulled me aside after the meeting and said, Mr. Hickman, you must not be around here because people from around here, we call it Buchanan, and you better learn how to do it now. So I learned real quick, and I kept wondering why everybody was looking at me strange. So that was a K-8 school, and it was an adventure because I'd been mostly in the inner city type or the suburban type to that point. So I got to see that, and I grew from that. Through that time, you probably saw where we made cuts, bliss, and blue ribbon, and I want to explain blue ribbon. A lot of people don't understand that blue ribbon, there are two types of blue ribbon, and I didn't even know at that time. All I knew was there was this award they called a blue ribbon. Well, we were nominated, and we had to go through a very intensive screening process. When we were nominated, we learned that there are two types. One type is for high achievement. That's kids that are having a lot of proficiency level in your school. That's where you see your Williamson County, where they've got kids coming prepared that are coming in already proficient, and they're getting those blue ribbons for that. The second one we were nominated for was for gap closure. And what gap closure is, we took all of our subgroups and we were able to keep for 4 years a single-digit percentage difference between the subgroups and the all, which we didn't know that wasn't normal. We just knew we were wanting to meet every kid where they were at and making sure every kid was growing and every kid was getting what they needed. We weren't seeking awards. What we were seeking was to make sure when a kid left Buchanan that they were well prepared and people knew that they came from our school. So I was so proud of my staff when we did receive that, because it just really was the kudos for all the hard work and the dedication, and it showed, our vision was working. Once we went to national to receive it, we found out how much more it was, how few people received it. During that year, it was a little over 400 schools in the whole United States got a blue ribbon. And I wish I remember the number, but it was right at 30 or 40 something that got it for gap closure from the whole country, and we were one of those. So that was quite an honor. And I wish I could stand here before you or sit here before you and say, hey, it was all me, but it wasn't. It was a team effort that took all of us working together to get it. And I was just the guy that pushed the vision and gave the resources and whatever they needed, and helped where I could. It was definitely true. So why did I move from that school? I was approached by the Wilson County district superintendent, and we had I looked at going to one of the schools up there, and she had asked me to come in to help with a school that was going through a big rezone. And it was two community schools that had been in the community for a while, and they were shifting 75% of the kids from one school to this school and 75% from this school to a new school. She wanted somebody to come in and kind of keep it even keel and help the transition, somebody with experience. So me being the fixer, I decided that would be a great challenge to do. What I inherited was not only seeing 75% of the students being transferred out, but also 75% of the teaching and the staff. That year I was left with having to rehire every 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade ELA teacher. They took them all. It was a huge challenge for us to make a new culture there with all the newness there with the kids, the parents, and the teachers. We worked hard on that. Once again, I wish I could take credit for those, but it was a group effort. Everybody pitched in. At the end of that school year, we did end up being a Tennessee Reward School. I was very proud of that school. Dr. Wright came to me at the end of that school year. Michael, yes ma'am, I need you to go fix something for me. She asked me to move on to Mount Juliet Middle School. Mount Juliet Middle School was a level 1 school. It was very fortunate because the state had just changed the guidelines, where it used to be if you had one subgroup that fell below the allowed line, you would be put on the list. That year they had changed it over to 2 subgroups had to, so it saved them from being put on the list because they had only one. It was a very different and unique situation. It happened to be the largest middle school in the state of Tennessee. It had almost 1,700 students in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. There was some toxicity there. We had to identify those. We had to work through it. We found the real go-getters, the people that got on board that really wanted to see change, that really had students at the center of what they felt was most important of the school. So we grabbed those students, those teachers, and we worked hard. We worked really hard. We put several teachers on plans, and not plans in a negative way, but plans where we could help them grow and become better, because we didn't want them to be level 1 anymore, and they didn't either. So we had a lot of professional development for those teachers, and we worked hard, and we didn't make them do anything that we didn't do either as an administrative team. We were right there with them. At the end of the year, after all the work, we were a level 5 Tennessee Reward School. It was a big accomplishment for that faculty, and they had a lot of celebration, and it really validated the hard work they were doing, and I felt very good for them. Felt pretty good. We made it into June, and then I get a phone call. Michael, I've got a job for you. So Dr. Wright called me into her office again, and she had a school that had kind of the opposite going on, low teacher morale. The scores were falling. We were seeing inconsistency in scores in subgroups, and the teachers were just plain miserable. So she asked me to go in to fix them. Me, being the military type, yes ma'am. But, this time I actually put in a but, and I said, but if at all possible, can I stay here for at least 2 or 3 years? And she laughed. I went there, and that was an easy turnaround. Teachers just want to know, what do you want me to do? Give me, if you're going to ask me to do something, give me what I need to do it, and then support me. And that was probably the easiest turnaround that I've ever done. We were very disappointed at the end of the year when the state testing didn't happen, and that's not just coming from the principal. That's coming from my teachers. And I can give you references to call if you don't believe me, because they were really looking forward to the results coming back. They really felt that we were going to come out of this as a level 5, and I felt that too, because we benchmarked along the way, and it was really matching up to us being a level 5 and getting that reward school status. So here I am in front of you tonight.
Well, Mr. Hickman, you've alluded to building some successful teams. I'd like to hear about your process for developing a successful team, whether whichever one of those schools you want to pick on, or but if you can, just talk about how you keep it student-centered and how you support your employees to develop them as well.
And it's an easy formula. It's the same formula that I've used in every school, and it's the same, and it works. I was very fortunate that Rutherford County really invested a lot of money in it to its administrations from central office on down, and they spent a lot of money training us in professional learning communities. And not just read a book. They sent us to a lot of the conferences where the people that came up with it. And they also had a local that was part of that, Dr. Bob Aker. And we had a lot of folks that would come in and train us. So we got a good understanding of what does it mean when you say all means all, other than that cliche word of, hey, let's put it on a t-shirt, all means all. So when you start developing a team, you've got to go out, and I'll allude to Mount Juliet Middle first. You've got to find out who truly has children at their heart. Who are the ones that truly want to see all kids grow and mean it? People say it, and it's become very cliche-ish, but you need to make sure they mean it. Once you find those folks, you've got to make sure you have different perspectives. I am very a big proponent of bringing in not only your teachers and other staff, but bringing in parents and businesses. Once we learned that key at Buchanan, we really started seeing some big-time increases in what we were doing. Business folks have a lot of perspective, and they're just too used to us coming at schools holding out our hands so they can give us money. And we backed off of that and never asked any of them for money. We just asked them for their help and their perspective. And then we did get a little greedy and said, would y'all want to come in and tutor? Or would y'all want to come in and read books? And they really loved that. So you got to develop a team that's vested and make sure you're including all stakeholders. You've got to make sure, because sometimes as educators, we get pigeonholed in our perspective, and we need those outside perspectives to help us to see and make some decisions. Once we do that, we have to commit to a very detailed plan. And the plan, you can't just throw out, okay, make all students better, or I need you to make sure you do this. You got to give them the resources, and you got to give them a detailed plan, and then you got to give them the resources. We believed in benchmarking kids through common formative assessments. We believed what we would do was stay kind of close together, and how we taught any of our standards, and this is K through. So that way we can kind of benchmark when we come to a point and see where are the kids at. When we saw the majority of our kids didn't learn it, that was a us problem right away, and we knew to reteach. But if we saw we had 4 or 5 students that still didn't have it, we immediately jumped into interventions. And we pulled those kids in, and we had intentional interventions on that specific standard or skill, and they stayed into that intervention until they learned it. That was the big difference maker. So collecting a team that was able to read data, and I had to teach data. Every school I've been at, I've taught data to the teachers, how to read it and what to look for. Having that leadership team is the most important thing. And your question, going back to it, is how do I pick that team? Where do I get it from? And you have to go back to finding people that are willing to spend that time, that sees this as a critical issue, and are putting those kids in, like I said at the beginning, at first. At the end of the day, if we were a company or we were a manufacturer, what would our product be? And we have to keep that in mind. Students, students, students. Okay.
Thanks for joining us, Mr. Hickman. My question is, how have you used planning and goal setting to improve your school or system?
Okay. As you know, all schools have to come up with a school improvement plan yearly, and as well as districts with their strategic plan. I've seen many schools where they fail in this. They do this because it's just a task. Let's get it checked off the list. I'm one of those that if I'm going to do it, might as well be worth something. So every year we truly, at the school level, when we do our school improvement, we really look through the data. We dig through it, and we don't care if it hurts when we look at that data, because we know we need to improve it. So we design these for our school, and then as a principal, it's my responsibility, or as a director of school, superintendent, it's more than responsibility, it's their duty to make sure nothing penetrates what you have decided you are going to focus on. If it doesn't align to it, you don't do it. You don't go out and buy this thing because some seller is trying to sell it to you and it's cheap. You don't do that. If it's not aligned to what those students need and your school improvement says, you don't do it. You have to make sure when you develop this. And when you develop it, it goes back to, again, on the district level, school level, you've got to have many perspectives. You've got to have diversity. You've got to make sure that you're seeing all perspectives of what needs to be done. And we take it sincerely. Every school I've been at, that's been the basis of how we grow, when we focus on that. But I will say, when you do set up your goals, don't set up too many. What we're finding is districts, principals, they have too many goals. And there's kind of a saying out there, if you have too many goals, then you really don't have any. You need to focus on specific goals and attack those goals that are the most impactful for your district. Once you accomplish those, then we go on to the next most impactful. But too many people have failed because they just have too many targets. And you don't need that many, 2, 3 at most.
Thank you for being here. My question is, in your administration, what avenues are open for you to listen to the concerns of the employees, the students, parents, and the community?
The first thing I'll throw out there, and it's for all of them, is you got to have visibility. You got to be seen. You got to be out there. People have to know that you're not just stuck up in your office and never out there. You need to be at the schools. You need to be at events, and sometimes not just school events. You need to be at other events. Being out there and being accessible to people. You need to be seen as a person, not a figurehead. And so visibility would be the first thing you have to do. When you start looking at parents, and I made this comment today, and it may come back up again tonight, but I have had many parents coming and yelling at me. And at no time has it ever bothered me. And you want to know why? Every screaming, kicking, yelling parent that I've ever had to deal with, you know what they were doing? They were trying to advocate for their child. And once you understand that, you just calm them down and say, I'm listening to you, and then you listen. You got to make time, intentional time in your schedule to be able to talk to parents, to people. So you got to make that schedule. Then one thing I like that we've done at school level and district level is sometimes people just feel intimidated. They feel like they're going to have retribution or retaliation if they state their problems. I'd like to form at least a monthly committee of teachers where they have and it may already be happening here, but they have a representative from their school that they send questions. And the questions are presented to me and key members of the staff here that are held as anonymous for us to answer. And then we answer those. And if we can't, we'll tell them we can't at this time, but we'll get back to them. I think that's another avenue we need to give teachers, to have an anonymous way, because there's some trust that's got to be built. And right now, a new superintendent, it's going to take a minute for people to trust that person. So I'd like to start that. And then I'd like to have a parent one. I'd also like to meet with, the PTO parents at least, quarterly if possible. And then I'd also like to meet with the business as much as we can, because that's harder to schedule with business folks where they're going, but at least have those opportunities. And then another one I'd like to throw at you too is one that Wilson County does that I've really found to be a great asset is the places of faith. Have meetings just with those folks. Those are some of the biggest donors in the schools, is places of faith, and we cannot not listen to what their input is. We in many times, I know I've been at schools where that's how some of the kids got fed in the summer, or it's how some of the kids got those take-home backpacks. So I'd like to make sure we carve out intentional time for groups. But going back to, I've got to be out there and I've got to be visible.
And the last part of that is, how would you plan to have the time available for all of those involved?
The plan, what you've got to do is be intentional. And one of the things I do is I live by my calendar, and almost to detriment, but you carve out that plan, that time intentionally. You put it in your calendar and you make sure it happens. Obviously, sometimes things will come up. I know it does. Things will come up. You have an emergency, but you don't make that the norm. You make that the exception when that happens. But you intentionally put it in your calendar and have it scheduled for every school year, not just month by month, but for the whole school year, just like you would do a school calendar.
Hello, Mr. Hickman. With Maury County Schools having such a diverse system, as we saw and as you know, we have rural, city, rapid growth areas. What would you do to ensure that all of those kids in that population, that their needs are met?
Very layered question you just asked, because when you talk about, the diversity, we've got diversity not just in the type of schools, but also diversity in the diversity in our teachers, diversity in our student population. And, I said this at Central, and it kind of holds true here. The question is not, how are you going to make decisions about diversity? That's not the question we should be asking. The question we should be asking is, how are we going to use diversity to make decisions? So when we start talking about from students to schools, we need to make sure we're including those populations, listening to them. What are their needs? I've been fortunate to be in a suburban, city, and a community school, and they're all different, and you have to recognize that. We want to make sure that we're creating equal opportunity for all kids. I know one of the questions that is really nationally starting to take the spotlight is the community school versus consolidating. And my answer to that is it's in between for those schools. We can't take the heart of identity out of a Hampshire or a Culleoka or a Santa Fe, because like I learned in Buchanan, that's their identity. That's who they are. You have great grandparents that come there. But however, we do need to be able to create opportunity for those students to start seeing some, especially specifically talking about high school students, to get some of the courses that the larger schools are. If they choose not to take them, but we need to create that opportunity for them. So we need to understand that each school is different. We need to understand that when we're making these decisions, when we're making decisions on diversity, what are we doing with our subgroups? That's where we've got to have that diverse perspective helping us make the decisions.
So, what are the reasons you want to leave your current position and come lead Maury County Public Schools?
That's a great question. And one thing you'll learn about me, I'm very transparent. And integrity means everything to me. And so you might hear answers from me tonight. I'm going to be truthful. You might not like them, but it's going to be the truth. One of the reasons I started looking at this position a few months ago, and when things started to really snowball with the director position here, I really started to pray about it because something was tugging at my heart. I mean, this is my hometown, and this is not this school system where, you look at test scores. This is not who this school system is. This is nowhere near what this school system is. This school system has produced some fine people. An example, I've got people from my own class that are not just doctors and lawyers, but presidents of huge companies. So this system is more than what it's showing right now. I'm the fixer. Dr. Wright has showed me that. I just want to come home and do my best to put this place back to where it should be, where it's supposed to be, back on top. We shouldn't be talking about the bottom 5%. We should be talking about the top 5%. And also, looking at some of the things that can be fixed are pretty simple. And the problem is not the teachers. These are great teachers here. They're working their hearts out. It's somewhere in the middle. We need to be fixing this because these teachers are working hard every day. So we've got to do our best at the central office level to get this boat turned around.
Mr. Hickman, my question is, could you describe a significant change that you've initiated in your current role and tell us what evidence you have to show it was a positive change? And how did you build support for that change?
And I'll apologize, but I'll go back to one of the answers I gave before was, every school that I've been to, what I do is we really focus on student accountability. And that is usually the biggest change to every school I've been to, is a focus away from teaching to students learning. And you may not know the difference there. You might think, hey, isn't that the same? I'll give you an example. You can go teach your heart out to that wall, but it ain't going to learn anything. So what I do is try to shift that mindset to we need to focus more on what the kids are learning. Obviously, you're going to have to teach. You're going to have to teach well, and you're going to have to use the tools you're given. So doing just a whole mindset change of let's look at students and be accountable for what they're learning. And the way you leverage your support on a change of any magnitude is you have to have that buy-in. And most of the time it comes from information. You need to let them know through the information what you're doing, let them know what they need to do, and then you need to make sure they know the process. Too many times leaders fail because they leave that step out. They ask people to change, and something very complex they'll ask them to change, but yet they won't give them the structure, the design, the instructions on how to change, to do that complexity of change. Most teachers, if you ask them, they'll say, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And some teachers feel when they don't know it, that's when chaos starts to ensue and you won't get buy-in. So you've got to make sure to include them in the process the whole way and be very transparent about it.
Again, thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. What steps would you take to ensure school funds are spent wisely and accounted for properly?
As we know, the school budget right now is one of the biggest hot topics for all districts, not just this one. With the current situation going on, that most of the districts are being asked to do a status quo. When we have a school budget, we have to be good stewards of that money. We have to be intentional on how we spend it. We have to have understanding of what we're spending it on. That is my role as a superintendent, to make sure you guys are very clear and have concise understanding of what we're asking. My first inclination when I look at a school budget or a district budget is you always have to put people first. People over programs any day. So when we start looking at the programs, I have to justify what that budget, why I want that in the budget, and does it show how it's going to align, how it will align to our to each school's school improvement plan, and also make sure it's aligned to our district one. We've got a lot of ground to make up here, and looking what I've researched, and there's got to be a lot of trust put back into being a good steward and showing that we are using that money on the district side, not the board side. Are we spending it where we say we're going to spend it, and are we spending it in a way that helps teachers and students? The way we need to account for it is, and I think you guys do it, is we need to make sure that just like you would a checkbook, which is becoming more and more of a anomaly to some of the younger generations, we have to make sure that we keep a simple math formula, 1 + 1 = 2, and make sure that we're not spending more than what we have said we're going to spend in that budget. And we need to be doing that monthly, if not more often, and making sure we're keeping the board informed.
Our board is dependent on the county commission to fund the budget. How would you propose to gain their support and trust in the budget process?
A question like this was asked earlier today, and the first thing that I want to put out there is, you know, I think that we have to understand, we have to have that faith that everybody that sits on that county commission, not a one of them are saying, I don't want to help schools. Not any of them are saying, I want students to not do well. Everybody on that county commission really wants to help schools. They want to help students. Fortunately, they don't have the money tree out back. They can just go give that extra money. If they could, I believe they would give us every penny that we ask for. Unfortunately, they're dealing with a bigger task and a bigger budget than we are. We've got to build some trust with this county commission. We've got to mend some bridges. We've mend some fences and build those bridges. We've got to make sure to show them that we are being good stewards of the money. And when we ask for something, it's truly a need, not a want. We've got to build that bridge and make it where we're going across the aisle, and we got to make sure as a school board and as the superintendent that the relationships that we build are pure, honest, and we all have the common goal in mind, which is how are we going to help these students, how are we going to help these kids in Murray County. The business folks will completely back us. I mean, the meeting today with the business folks, they'll tell you, we need to be producing kids that are work ready when they leave these schools. And, you know, that takes time and money, so it's an investment when we ask that county commission, give us these funds, because you're investing back in your county to have these students be able to come back out. But we got to be transparent with them. We got to be very transparent what we're doing.
Have you been successful in getting strong parental and community support for a school, program, or district? And tell us about one of those successes.
Okay, and I'll go back to I'll go to a different one. You know, it goes back into being visibility and transparency and including parents and the business community. Each school I've been at, that's part of the model I've used, and I want to make sure that I continue to use that model. There are social media has become a new intangible into decision-making processes and news releases and all that. Well, I believe Murray County has one too, but they have a parents page in Wilson County. And that parents page can be very deadly in the perception of schools. So what better way, you know, to bridge some of that and to gain their support than to invite the main ones to be a part of that school so they can see it at school level. You know, what better person to fight for you out in the public than the people that are leading those kind of things, those social media and those news outlets and those, you know, churches. Because sometimes when we see those social media sites or even the news itself, it's so misinformation construed. They don't have the complete understanding. And I believe once we make them a part of the district and make sure we lead them, help include them in the decisions we make, that you'll gain that support, and they'll get a broader understanding of what it truly means to make the decisions that you guys have to make. So transparency, and make sure that you're bringing their perspectives in. It's very important.
What do you consider to be major strengths that you would bring to the position?
Obviously, the first one, being from this community, I have a great understanding of what this community is about. You know, traditions, and just in knowing the folks. But however, that's just one little thing. It's not a major thing. I think I have the history of transforming schools. And when I say transforming schools, and this is something I don't want the board to get lost in, because when we talk about transforming schools, sometimes we talk about just transforming those low-achieving schools. you also have to look at some of the high-achieving schools and make sure that we're sustaining where they're at. You've got to be able to do both, and I've been able to do both. So I have a pretty good track record of school transformation in the sustain of schools, and a good understanding of the formula that you need to take those schools there. So I would say, though, other than being from here, that that's a strength of mine.
I want you to think about one mistake that you might have made on a job, in one of your jobs, and I want you to think about how you own that mistake and what did you learn from that mistake to improve your future performance.
Oh my gosh, so many to pick from here. The wise man understands that you're going to make mistakes and you can grow from them. When you try to bury them, that's when you don't grow. So obviously, you do need to grow from them. I'm going to just pick a simple one out that's kind of funny in my mind, was when I first became a principal, and for you parents, I messed with the car line. Yeah, I was that guy that thought I would change the car line. And so, because at the other school where I was an assistant principal, it worked so well this way. And I was bent on changing it. And, it didn't work. And so, obviously, I knew I had to, suck that one up. I listened to my assistant principal. I listened to one of my parents that I just adored, and we fixed it. So, some things what I learned from that is some things don't need to be fixed. You just leave it alone, and you just sustain it.
Think of a problem that was brought to you recently. What was the problem and how did you handle it?
Being at the school I'm at now, it's and I immediately think to this one is the way they have been creating a school schedule. And if you've ever been a part of a school schedule, it is like trying to put a puzzle together. And when you put this puzzle together, you think you've got it all together, and that one piece doesn't fit right. So one of the problems that was brought to me was they were very concerned because they threw on 3 new preschools into my school after the schedule had been made. And I love preschool, so if there's any preschool teachers out there. But they're like fungus. Once the district gives you one, they'll give you more. They just keep growing. And so, but I love them, and I love those kiddos. But we had to go back, and some of the teachers were not very happy that we had to redo the schedule. But, you just have to understand and have that transparency and let them know why you're doing it and how you're doing it. And so we had to move mountains, but we finally got it worked out. But it's one of those, the gist of your question is, when you have the problem, own it, get help, solve it, and make sure it's equitable.
How have you worked with the following groups? There are 10. No, I'm just there are 4.
Okay.
How have you worked with the following groups to generate support for schools? With the employees, the businesses, the diverse community groups, and with media?
Okay. So you said employees, businesses, diverse community groups, and media. All right. So I'll just go ahead and give an overarching answer to start it with. Is you got to be transparent. You got to be honest. You got to be. You can't play games or tricks. You have to be honest. Then you got to be visible. They've got to see you, because too often principals and district personnel and superintendents, they just become a figurehead where they're untouchable, and you can't do that. You got to let all of these different groups see you, and you finally have to be sincere. When you meet with these groups, they got to know that you care, and you truly care. It's not just I'm listening to this person. When you look at employees, you need to go back to my philosophy of they've got to own it. And I fully believe that when you own something, you take better care of it. And I feel when you give the employees the opportunity to own it, they will take better care of it. And they'll do a lot better than we had ever anticipated to make sure it happens. Once you let them own it, they start to trust you. And you'll start gaining support for whatever initiatives you have because you have their support and you have them helping you design them. Businesses, I've talked about businesses in depth. They've got to be a part of you. They got a perspective that most educators, I don't have. I was so blessed at Buchanan to have a business/educator that really schooled me in all I didn't know and was very tender but very direct with what I needed to know and really taught me a lot for what we need businesses for and how to utilize them. And then the diverse community groups, it goes back to that visibility, being sincere and being transparent. And you've got to make intentional, I forgot who asked that question, intentional scheduling to meet with those groups often. There's many different groups out there, and I think all have something to offer. But you need to make sure that you're planning and having intentional planned time for those community groups, because most of these folks know they know the community way better than I will ever know it. Specifically, the ones that are in like certain areas, and some of your diverse areas, they'll have a perspective I'll never know. And what we're finding is sometimes some of your minority populations do fear retribution and retaliation and are scared to come to a principal or to a superintendent or to a board member. But they'll go to that community group or that, whoever that person is or that group, and they'll know what it is. And that's where you can get in tune to some of those answers and some of those problems. So making sure that you're intentionally setting aside a time for that. And you also got to make sure to gain their respect and to get their support is make sure that you're celebrating all the different diversity of the communities in the schools and in the district. And then the media, you got to be proactive. The media can be used as a tool. The media, if you don't give them the right information, sometimes they'll fill in the blanks themselves. So use them, leverage them as a tool, be proactive with the media, and be honest and transparent with the media. Use them to your benefit. Don't wait and have to react to a story that it's going to get out there and see what they're going to write about it. Go ahead and talk to them about it so they'll have the right information. That's how I feel about the media. And that way, when you go and make that effort with the media, you'll get their support. And then before they put a story out, they will wait or contact you and try to get the real story before they fill in the lines themselves. Did I answer all that? It was a whole bunch you put there.
What approach do you intend to take in communicating with the board if you are selected as superintendent?
The board's my boss. Bottom line, the board is my boss. And military, you learn your boss is your boss. Your boss needs to know everything you know. I hope to first gain trust. I hope to gain, those relationships where, I'm going to be able to call and be able to email and let you guys know first what's going on. And I'm going to be open and transparent. If you hear a rumor, please ask. I don't like rumors festering up. I will be directly honest to you because those are morale killers. Those are district killers. Also, when things happen, unfortunately, going back to the social media and the time of internet, things may happen where the social media grabs a hold of it before I even know. But I guarantee you, as soon as I know if it's something, an emergency or something that's directly impacting the district that you have to know, I will either get an email or call each of you personally and let you know. But we have to foster that communication. And I will throw this back to you, is we have to foster the communication both ways. We have to be able to speak to each other. If you have a problem, you have a concern, come to me. Let me know. I'm a big boy. It won't hurt my feelings. If I need to change something, you're my boss. I'm going to listen to you. You know, I've got a lot of wise people with a lot of experience and a lot of different perspectives sitting in front of me. I've got a lot to learn from you. A lot. But that communication, you know, obviously it's going to be two-way, and I will keep you guys posted of everything going on, and hopefully we can commit to the relationship. You hear something, just ask me. I'll be honest, even when it hurts.
So I'm sure you've done some research of our district. I would hope you have. Can you name one area specifically that you think you can improve under your leadership?
Probably what I would say is precise planning. And let me explain what I mean precise planning. We have to be very intentional, and we have to be very have great explanations, great directions, and it has to be very intentional how we communicate what we need done. And I've alluded to this several times, but there's a lot of unknowns when I've looked into this district. A lot of we had a meeting today, and there was something that came up that they didn't know the answer because nobody had ever told them. You have to be specific. You don't just say, this is our goal. When you make a goal, you can't wait for somebody else to do it for you. As a district superintendent, you've got to be specific about that goal, commit to planning by setting benchmarks, how we're going to get there, what are we going to use to get there, and make sure that we're going to be able to financially support that, because the budget's tight. But so specific planning that is very intentional, and it's going to be very, like I said, it's very specific.
What evidence can you cite to demonstrate you have the ability to work efficiently with, sorry about that. What evidence can you cite to demonstrate you have the ability to work effectively with diverse student population and multicultural groups?
I will go back to the right question I said earlier. Is, you know, the question isn't how we're going. How my answer goes back to that. The question isn't what is my view on or how do I want to work with diversity. It's how am I going to use diversity to make these decisions. And we've got to make sure that we are a diverse school system with diverse leaders and having different perspectives. The one thing I couldn't find that you guys might be able to know, but now we're finding, you know, that most districts are seeing 40 plus different ethnicities/cultures, languages in their districts now. And I don't know what that number was because I couldn't find it. But, you know, we've got to make sure that we understand what those cultures that are diverse coming to us, what are they comprised of? We've got to understand them better. And we need to have district leadership that is making sure that as a district that we are placing an emphasis on using those diverse perspectives and making decisions for them. And what was the second part of that question? And what was that?
That they demonstrate the ability to work with diverse students and multicultural groups.
Okay. I think that you're asking for an example. When I was at Buchanan, we were, I have two examples there. While I was there, my first year as the principal there, I had a black lady that came and sat down with me, and she said, "Mr. Hickman, you realize there's hardly any black students in your building?" And I had. And I could count from K-8 from almost, it was 750, I said the wrong number today, 700, it was about 750 students. I think I had about 10 minority students in my whole school. And she said, you know why that's for? And I said, well, because they're probably not zoned here. I don't know. She said, no. She said, you have plenty of African American families and students zoned for you. It's the perception of your school. And there was what I called, and let me preface this, racism is racism. No matter how you look at it, racism is racism. But there was unintentional racism happening at Buchanan that I identified. One of which was, we put kids that are black in the same classroom because that way they can have somebody to identify with. Ideas such as that, just like I said, is an unintentional racism that we had to go through. We were noticing on students' notebooks, some of the things that they were saying, and we had to really make a concerted effort. And we worked with that parent, her perspective, to be able to change that view of our school. And that took a couple years, and we were still working on that, and it was 6 years. But our minority population had drastically increased. And it's a shame to have a school that doesn't have diversity, because real world is diversity. And we were really working hard to change that, and it didn't happen overnight, but we were seeing it went from this many to we were probably right at about 10 to 15. We moved it to about 20%, I would say, students of diversity. They started coming back to the school. So
how would you work with the board to be effective, make good decisions, and be respected as a board and by the community?
It goes back to transparency. I've got to be transparent. I can't. I've got to tell you exactly what's going on and the truth, even if it's. I know you're not going to like it. I have to be transparent. I have to keep everybody informed. You look at most, like the school I just went to, one of the biggest reasons people will have lower morale is they don't have the information, or they misconstrue the information. So we have to keep people informed. I have to remain professional. That's huge. I am a professional. Almost sounds like the NCO creed, right? I am a professional. You have to remain professional at all times. My core values are integrity, loyalty, and dependability. And if I ever step out of that, I hope one of you remind me, because that is what I truly believe. And when you foster those things, you will see great leaders that you will disagree with. But you know what? You'll respect them. And there's been many in my military past and my work life that I might not have agreed with them, but because of their integrity, I respected them. And I think that is the starting point of building that trust.
Describe how you have led a school or system in creating a vision and building support to accomplish that vision.
All right. When we were first given visions, and I'll go back to when I talked earlier about the school improvement plan, it was done alone. Many people just cast a vision and said, this is going to be for the district. We're going to cast this vision and say it's going to be for the school. What we've learned is that a vision has to have buy-in. And one of the things that, and I was looking for it, if you'll give me a second, was when I went to Wilson County, we worked with McCrell Balanced Leadership. And McCrell Balanced Leadership talked about a lot of these things like that. And one of them was building vision and mission. And it talked about how to do it. And it talked about the difference between consensus and voting. And so we really learned to build a vision, you have to get everybody's perspective. And we did a little activity. And this activity basically was we put out there what we deemed most important to the school. And we did it as principals, and we did it as for our district, and we did it for our teachers. Then what we did was we took the things of what we thought were important, and we put them together. And once we put those together, we started to see the parts of our vision come together. Once we formed the vision, we took consensus. Consensus wasn't a vote, and the winning people, the ones with the most votes, won. Consensus was, what is something we can use with the information we just came up with that we're all going to be okay with? It took a while to come up with our consensus, but at the end, we found something that we felt that truly would drive, one, the district, and something we all could commit to, and at the end of the day, pointed back to student learning. When we did it at school, the same thing as well. We once again built it, we all raised consensus on it, and we felt really good about it, that we could build off of this. And we set that as our vision. So what used to take about 5 minutes for a principal to sit down and come up with a vision, now took about a half a day to literally come up with for the district and for the schools. So that's how I would build it. A vision is make sure we have multiple perspectives working together to come through with a consensus of what our vision will be. Once you do that, now you've got buy-in. Now you've got people who are gonna really accept that vision and use it.
Describe a situation related to your current job that demonstrates your ability to inspire and motivate people.
As a leader, you have to be willing to do the worst job, the job that nobody wants to do. You have to be the one that will do whatever it takes. My teachers will see me mopping a floor, teaching a classroom. They'll see me outside picking weeds. They will see me doing everything. I feel to inspire your teachers, to inspire the people that report directly under you, you have to show them that you will do whatever it takes, and they will see your commitment. The other thing that I want to show, and I think it truly inspires, is they see I will go to no ends to make sure they are okay. Through this and I hate using this word, it's almost getting too, but this unprecedented time, I have really had huge concern for my staff. Unfortunately, in Wilson County, we also had the tornado. So I have one teacher that lost her total home, and I've had several others that's had significant damage. And just being there, I helped her, and it was about 10 different teachers. We all unpacked her stuff from her house and moved it into storage. So if you're going to inspire, you got to show everybody that you're willing to get down and get dirty with them.
Okay, we come to the last question. Last but not least, how would you develop a school system budget? and tell us who you would involve and how would you involve them.
All right. The first thing, and I've said this several times today, is the first thing we need to make sure in a budget is people. People over programs. We need to make sure people are going to get paid. We need to make sure people are going to get that paycheck. There's nothing more demoralizing for a teacher than not getting a paycheck. And we've got to make sure we are getting it to them on time, and they've got to know they're going to get that. So the budget, the first thing is people. We've got to make sure we're allotting, and it's usually about 70 to 80% is people. And so we've got to make sure that's first. Then what we have to do is make sure we're enacting a needs assessment. We need to make sure we're doing a needs assessment through the schools, and I think in my district, sometimes the principals jokingly call it the wish list. That never happens. The wish list, and each department making sure that they have their needs assessment. We need to then take those needs assessments and we need to make sure, see if they are going to align to our strategic plan. Because if they don't, then we can't add those to our budget. Then we need to make sure through that needs assessment, the most important, we bring in our department chairs, we bring in our principals, and we try to work through and see the order of the things we need and the priority we need. We need to make sure that we're keeping you guys informed at all times, making sure that you know what we're doing, and I don't want to drop a budget in your lap where it's going to surprise anybody. I want to make sure our financial person is communicating with you on many occasions and very often about the things that we're looking at and doing, and I want to be able to make sure you understand the programs, that, oh, it's just a great program this district's using, that you truly understand it and know what that program is. I understand sometimes you're put under a time constraint, as you are this year, to have it, I believe, by June 30th. I think that's what the comptroller said. So we're trying to run that race right now, and I know some of that is very time sensitive, but with that said, that's no excuse still not to let you know what those items are in the budget. Maybe even a detailed list to go with that. If we put this program, this is what this program is. Most of you already know what those programs are, but you can't assume. You need to then, once we have that budget, we've got to make sure that we are being very transparent to everyone, all stakeholders, including the parents, business owners, as well as teachers, and then the county commission. We need to be very detailed and make sure with the county commission that we are being, once again, transparent, and let them even know what some of these things are. If you don't tell them what it is, they'll just assume it's just fluff, and we got to make sure they understand that why the needs assessment is there, why those are the things that we need. So, and I would finally also say that, you know, with these budgets, they are what they are. We need to do everything in our power, just like a checkbook. 1 + 1 = 2, and our checkbook is going to balance, and we don't, as a director or superintendent, try to overspend.
Well, that's all the formal questions. If there's any follow-up from any of you, I'll let you speak now. Well, you may have questions for us, but we'll come back after dinner and let you do that, okay? We'll adjourn for food. I would say 7:30. It's the goal, but last time we ran into problems, so we're gonna do better tonight.
You gotta keep Betty away from dessert.
Yeah, well, right.
You have to work around a couple ladies.
I'm gonna call the meeting back to order. This is a point of the evening in the interview process that we want to give the interviewee an opportunity to ask any questions of us. And so, Michael, the floor is yours.
First of all, thank you for everybody today. I've been able to really get a lot of information already, talking to the schools, the staff, and the community. And I just am left with really one question for each of you. And I'm sure you've heard it before, but really want to know what your expectations of the superintendent is and what your vision for the superintendent will be.
Well, I think to establish trust, I think this board has had a lack of trust in many ways, and I think to just be there and keep us informed, make us part of the process. You know, I don't think any of us want to micromanage or anything like that. We just want to do what's best for kids, and we want to know that you're doing that as well.
I would wholeheartedly agree with that. I think trust is very important, keeping the kids at the center of our decisions and making sure that that's the center of how you run your day is really important. But I would also say just hard work. I mean, I think you acknowledge we're in the bottom 5%, and I just don't think we're going to, you know, get out of it working 8 to 5. So I think there's going to have to be long nights and weekends and, you know, just giving it your all and dedicating yourself to this role.
Well, I'm going to change it a little bit. Enforcing our policies. No matter what our policies are, you still got to enforce them. If it needs to be changed, I mean, we can look at it and see about changing them, but you got to make sure our policies are followed. And knowing our kids, number one. That's our main goal right there, is seeing our kids getting the education that they deserve. That's our main goal.
I don't know that I'm going to say anything anyone else hasn't said, but I think just unifying the county as a whole, unifying the board with the central office and the board and central office with the principals and trickling down, and that's going to have a huge effect. It's going to trickle down to the kids eventually, and I think unification of everyone is really needed right now, and with the citizens as well even.
Where do we start? I'll put it down to one thing. What I'm looking for is genuine leadership from the superintendent position, and in two ways for that. One, looking for some direction for us as a board to keep us moving in a forward path, and also making some of the tough decisions, because as a district we have some tough decisions that are going to be coming up, and being willing to take those and make those decisions, knowing on the front end that some of those are going to be very unpopular. They're going to be tough things, but being able to stand by those and to, as a leader, bring the explanation of why that's the direction this district needs to go. I know as a board member, that's one of the things I'm looking for, is that leadership, so that I can get behind that. And I think as we've talked during the day, one of the things that I do not like is that when we as a board have a vacuum and we start to make some decisions that are maybe based on the best thing at that moment or right then, but in the big picture, because there was not a unified direction of where we should have been going, it ends up probably not being the best course of action for the district. So I would like a leader that can help alleviate that and really keep us focused.
And I'm probably not going to say anything different than anyone else has said, but, you know, I know today we spoke a little bit about trust, honesty, teachers' morale, and focusing mainly on the kids and their needs. And I think that's a full-time job, and we appreciate you coming.
In addition to what everyone else has said, which is not a little bit, just a little bit there, I would like for Murray County to be put first. You know, I don't want someone who's just climbing the ladder to move on to something bigger and better, to teach somewhere else, to do presentations somewhere else, but to be here for Maury County. And realizing also that we are very diverse, and we do have rural and we do have urban, and we do have high growth areas, and you know, there's different approaches for each, but just really putting Maury County first.
I think when it comes to the leadership role, it's someone who casts the vision and put it out there, but not for their own notoriety or to be the star of the show, who does it truly to see teachers succeed, to see the kids succeed, and to see the community succeed. I mean, I've seen it numerous times, leaders in general who will cast a vision, go after that vision, and turn around and nobody's following them. I think that happens more often than not, and I think an effective leader in this position will be able to lift up the teachers. And when it comes to the students, we're not going to be, hopefully, this position won't have somebody who's just going to be throwing random things at the wall to see what works, but will truly just educate kids. I mean, that's what we just got to get back to. I think so many times we get wrapped up in all these other things, we lose sight of taking care of teachers and focusing on the kids. So that's what I look for out of this position.
I'd like to have a school district that the people, and most importantly, the students in Maury County can be proud of.
Thank you, everybody. I really enjoyed today. It's been really fun for me, honestly. I appreciate all of your time. I have really saw how much you guys really have invested into these kids, into this district, and I can see it. And that was what was most important to me, because if I were to work for a board, I got to make sure what their priority is, and their priority is these kids. And that's what counts. And I saw that in every one of you today. And heard it from most of you that I did speak about too. And we kind of got around it, maybe won't beat around the bush. But I did find out that's what your true intent was. Because just like you were putting, sometimes superintendents may be using this as a jump. Sometimes you can see school board members, they're using it for a jump also, just to start a political career. And I didn't see that at all today. So it makes me very delighted for this district. Regardless if I get this position or not, you guys have some hard decisions to make, and I really do appreciate your time with me. My intention when I took on to apply was I wanted a better Maury County Public Schools. My heart is here, and I feel confident with whoever you select, it's going to happen, especially with you guys driving that. And I know I can walk away with whoever you selected and know Maury County today will be in a better place than it ever has been. So thank you for the community. Thank you for your time with me today. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Michael. And thank you to all of you. We're adjourned.